Hello and welcome to the 6th episode of Nostalgic Pixel. I'm Brian, and this episode we're going to look at Castlevania. Castlevania just celebrated its 31st birthday, and on its 30th anniversary, I decided to go back and play this original of this amazing series that I love so much. I played this game on the Famicom Disk System. It was originally released in 1986. This game is a lot of fun, still holds up today, and is quite a challenge. I really enjoyed playing this game, and I hope you enjoy taking a look back at the original that started it all, Castlevania. This was the first entry in the Castlevania series that started off the franchise for decades to come. Not only did it spawn a series of games, but it also inspired many other games in their design as well. Castlevania is a classic side-scrolling platformer with nods to classic Universal horror pictures. Konami makes it clear in the credits where they have some of the inspiration by putting puns of the names of the actors that are famous for their characters in these classic horror films. The game takes place in Transylvania. You play Simon Belmont, a whip-wielding vampire killer hell-bent on killing Dracula. Along the way, having to fight many of his enemies, such as Frankenstein and the Mummy, as well as Death, the most evil. No one knew at the time that this game would spawn a series that would last for decades. I would say part of the reason that legend existed is because there were so many great games that popped up now and again throughout the decades. Although I think it has been a while since we really had one that captured the energy that some of the previous attempts had. The music in this game is excellent. It has really held up, and it is probably one of the strongest things in the game that, for me, keeps me playing the game because I enjoy the music, and especially since this game can be such a difficult challenge. It's nice that the music's good because you're going to hear it a lot, sometimes over and over and over and over. So, for me, the music being good is a very big plus. Speaking of this game being hard, it is hard. It's very challenging, but it doesn't feel always too cheap, although I would say the biggest thing that did kill me was not necessarily an enemy, but the stairs, or falling into a pit. The getting knocked back really can throw you off, especially when you have Medusas flying around. That is probably the biggest recipe for setting up disaster. However, practice and memorization will help you get through this game. It is very challenging, and it doesn't leave a lot of room for mistakes. What you may find yourself doing before you can even beat the level is by the time you do beat the level, you aced it like you just ran through with no mistakes. It can be that challenging, especially in the later levels where they hit you really hard over the head leading up to death. The game isn't without some of its rough edges. Some of these edges did get smoothed over in later releases of the franchise. I would say, for starters, if you're familiar with some of the later Castlevanias, then you may not be ready for some of the earlier setbacks in the game that later got smoothed over. You know, not necessarily setbacks, but just limitations in the game. As far as jumping, you really have to commit to where you're going because you don't really have a lot of opportunity to change your mind in midair. In fact, you pretty much don't have much of any chance to change your mind. Also, you can't jump on stairs, you have to climb on stairs, and stairs are great, except, like I mentioned earlier, I think they're the ones that killed me more than any other enemy in the game, because if you just don't get that angle perfectly right, you fall right off, and that's just can be frustrating. Even after you played the game several hours, it seems to happen to me anyway. Also, secondary weapons in this game are a must. In fact, you will find some of these weapons that are offered to you early in the level can be best used in the end of the level. So the challenge is getting that secondary weapon and hanging on to it and not dying the entire way all the way through to the boss. Each boss seems to have a real vulnerability to some of these secondary weapons. Holy water seems to be one of the biggest, most powerful weapons you can use because not only will it take out an enemy, but it'll kind of stun lock them while you just constantly attack them over and over again. This is a really good method for many of these bosses, but the challenge there, like mentioned earlier, is that oftentimes the holy water drops early in the level, and in order to keep it, you have to have a clean run all the way to the boss, and enough energy to survive it, because when you get to the boss, you'll find out that they hit very hard. I had fun playing this on the Famicom Disk System. It was neat to play it on a 30-year-old floppy disk from Nintendo, and also I enjoyed, even though there were loading screens, I did enjoy the ability to save my game instead of having to rely on passwords. Also for me, when playing this game, I'm a little OCD when it comes to getting all the candles, because I am constantly trying to get all the candles for the most part, because I need to collect those hearts. Hearts are what I need. I need as many as I can. I need to get all the money. I need to get everything. And another trick you want to look around for, if you're new to the franchise, is look for, wall food. You got to have that wall ham. It's so good. And you're always looking around for it. And when you do find it, when you find it in some of the unexpected places, even after you played the game so many times, I still find myself looking all over the place for it. It's insane. It's so much fun, though. As much as I enjoy collecting the hearts, I found later to understand, in order to get the multipliers often for your secondary weapons, is that you actually have to use your secondary weapons. Instead of hoard them all for the boss, it's actually a good idea to use them from time to time. It turns out it actually can make a lot of things much easier, as well as give you the opportunity for multipliers so that you can stun lock your enemies, especially the bosses. Growing up, some of my earliest memories of playing Castlevania is going over to my friend's house to play it. He and his brother were very good at this game, and I had a lot of fun playing it with them as well. One night, I remember we got together and they beat the game. It was a lot of fun. This game also had a release in the arcade, although it was a little different, and that it was more like a Play Choice 10 cabinet style, where it was basically just a port of the NES, or Famicom version, where you just paid for time. And this didn't interest me much at all, because generally when I like to go to the arcade, I like to play things that I couldn't play at home. Another thing to keep in mind is that Medusas and bats are relentless, and many of these enemies just continuously spawn, so trying to sit there and hold your own for a minute may not be necessarily a great idea, and that you kind of always want to keep moving forward in those instances, because the enemies are relentless. Once you have the secondary weapon that you love, and you're like me, going and getting all the candles, be sure to not accidentally capture a new secondary item if you don't want it, because in this Castlevania, you are not given the opportunity to go back and get the one you used to have. So whatever you pick up is what you have moving forward, and there's no way around it, short of not picking up the item in the first place. Another thing besides collecting hearts in the game is money, and at first you're kind of wondering what the point of money is in this game, and what's the point of points in this game since there's no shop to spend them on. However, money and points equal new lives, although the game does have unlimited continues. Even though I had beaten Dracula in later releases of Castlevania more recently, I found this original one to be very challenging. In fact, I would say you would really have to spend your time with it to get down the exact timing and patterns for yourself. Even after knowing what I needed to do, it still took practice to get down the right timing. Overall, this game is very hard, I would say, but it is fair. And for the most part, it doesn't always feel fair when you get knocked into a hole by Medusa or fall off stairs to your death. But if you memorize things, and this is a game where it really does take you to have to memorize, you can get through this game, and it is a lot of fun, and you enjoy going through the game for the most part. And going back and playing it again, it just seems to it's kind of a memory that doesn't go away. It hangs out there with you, at least for a while. You can go back and feel a lot better the second time around on things. The graphics for this game are extremely well done, I think, and hold up very well today. In fact, even the limited color palette, which as a kid growing up, being aware of other systems and other capabilities, was bothersome to me. Going back now, I just find their choice of color to be so well thought out and so well designed. The game is beautiful. It's beautiful to look at. the music, together they create this amazing atmosphere that you just want to spend more time in. And in some cases in levels, you get to spend a lot of time with, and you get very used to exactly the look of the game as well as the music. And like I said, thankfully the music is so good that you don't mind hearing over and over and over and over and over again. Again, this is the first Castlevania in the franchise, and while it is not my favorite Castlevania of all time, it does lead up to some of my favorite games of all time that show up later in the series. This game still holds up very well and really is challenging, but the music, the graphics, and the nostalgia is so worth it. If you haven't ever played a Castlevania game, don't get discouraged right away and just give it some time. Because like I mentioned before, a lot of this stuff can just come up to simple memorization. Well, there you have it. That's a look at Castlevania on the Famicom Disk System and Nintendo Entertainment System. I hope you enjoyed this look back at this classic. This game, again, started off a whole series that included some of my favorite games of all time. I look forward to covering more Castlevania games in the future. I thought it would be fun to start off with the original, considering last year it just had its 30th anniversary. Well, that does it for this episode. Please like and subscribe and share with your friends. Thanks again for watching.